Good evening and welcome to Face to Face. I'm Niresh Eliathambi. Well, there's never a dull moment in Sri Lankan politics when there's an election on. And this particular election, the presidential election that we are heading into, has thrown up more surprises than I can remember in any election. And right now, President Ranil Vikramasinghe is in the middle of a firestorm. But it's not a firestorm in his party, the UNP, it's a firestorm in the SLPP, which seems to be falling apart, coming together, falling apart, and many of them are now supporting the president, and others are not supporting. And it's a different scenario every day, or several different scenarios every day. And to discuss all this, we have with us someone who needs very little introduction or no introduction at all, Mr. Ravi Karunanayake, who has held the posts of Minister of Finance, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and several other cabinet posts, and is of course a stalwart of the UNP. Welcome, Ravi.
Thank you, Niresh.
So, Ravi, first we had the president declaring that he would contest as an independent, although he's the leader of the UNP, which was a little surprising, but perhaps not so surprising given the political scenario. But then we had the hierarchy of the SLPP coming out and saying that they would be fielding their own candidate. And then just a few hours later, we have, I think, something like 92 MPs who came out in support of the president, and then over 100 provincial councillors, former provincial councillors, have also expressed their support. So, what's going on, Ravi, with the UNP and the the SLPP rather? A lot of things happening.
Thank you, Niresh and MTP, for giving me this opportunity. You asked what's going on. Nothing going on. It was exactly what we said before, that Ranil Vikramasinghe would come in as an independent candidate. I told this almost 10 months ago when I was here, even though it was looked at that particular moment in confusion, because President Vikramasinghe had one objective. He was given a task of nation building and getting the country that was bankrupt into good order. And within the space of the 2 years, he has done the impossible. Life is not easy at all, I must confess. But certainly, 24 months ago, you put a switch, there was no lights. You had the father in a gas queue and a mother in the kerosene queue. The children look at what to get as food. You get on the roads, there were no buses going to record diesel and petrol, and no dollars, no ships coming, and today you have a complete change. So I guess you need to mention this because people have a very short memory, and whatever languishing that was done 24 months ago, as if there was nothing of that nature, is being professed at the moment. So the approach that was there was to get the country back into good order. And just a week ago, Hungary signed off as the Paris Club, the last member in the 17 members that agreed that the creditors have accepted the way forward of the government's payment plan. So with that particular one, you had almost 88% of our creditors accepting the payment plan. So now that the country is off bankruptcy, and also the reason being that the bond international sovereign bond holders also, almost 70% of that have accepted, your country is good to go. You saw Japan reinstituting the financing basis. The Colombo International Airport, the Bandaranaike Airport, had the financing starting back again by the Japanese. The Kadawatha to Mihirigama Expressway was going to start on many of the water projects. So that was the reason why basically Vikramasinghe said that he would basically come as independent. He wanted to solicit everyone's support rather than embrace one particular party. He belonged and he had done human service, but he thought it was a more plural approach of getting everybody's support in the process. And in that process, there has been many events that have taken place, which has happened, I must say, for a continuous period, but now it has happened to the collective good.
But do you think that the response of the SLPP, the party itself and the party hierarchy, has been a little bit surprising, given what you just said, the country's situation?
Well, each political party has their own political future. So we cannot determine as to how they should basically fashion their political future, but they have been explicit in the way that what they have said as to why not. But take the coin on the other side. You had the detractors that were saying, why have them? Now when the why have them is not there, now what's the question? The principal two opposition parties, they were hell-bent on saying that this is Vikramasinghe protecting a family, protecting a party, protecting interests, vested interests. Now what are they got to say? I mean, the platform that they were fighting for is completely blown open. And then you are basically now got to respond as to how it is. So President Vikramasinghe was always on one very clear ground of saying, I was given nation development. I want my innocent people in this country who have suffered well beyond from the day of independence. We have got independence, but true economic independence are not coming. Let's get that country into order was his genuine attempt right along. Every time we have been governing, that has been, no freebies, trying to get things moving in the correct manner. So now that things are moving in that direction, I guess it will be a completely difficult situation for the opposition now to get up and say, hey, you were saying something, now they themselves have walked out. And answer is different. We were consistent, coherent, and policy-oriented.
Now, Ravi, the result of this presidential election probably hinges on the 6.9 million voters who voted for President Gotabaya Rajapaksa during the last election. Where will they vote? How many of them will vote for the president? How many will vote for Anurakumara Disanayake? How many will vote for Sajith Premadasa? What do you think that this week's developments do to that 6.9 million?
Neeraj, you only took one aspect of it. I would say that there is 17.2 million voters, and generally voting takes place between 78 to 83, 84% of the voting.
That's right.
People have lost interest in politicians and the political drama that takes place. But still I believe that there would be 75 to 80% voting. So you'll have about 13 million that should vote. And with that, you should basically be able to look at, we believe that President Vikramasinghe should garner, a substantial vote. Now you asked the question about 6.9, that was what the previous president got. But that has, I guess, no relevance today, because today you have almost that particular figure being represented by almost 100 MPs that are coming in. As well as, remember, President Vikramasinghe is a UNP who we got basically lampooned, or we got Hamas in the political system in 2020, in the 2019 and 2020 election, where we basically had to redesign our party, refocus and reposition. Now, we had at the last presidential election, which you compared 6.9, the presidential candidate that we put forward got 5.7, and 5.7 in the general election, it reduced to them down to 27, that's 2.7 million votes. That 2.7 had other party votes also in. So roughly you had about 3 million UMPs that were silenced between the presidential and the general election. Now they are yearning to support President Vikramasinghe because inwardly they are UMPs. They gave us a message. We very humbly accepted the rectification of the UMP. That's why we have repositioned the younger, the experienced, the professionals have been brought in. And with that particular one, you have a 3 million UMP that was silent who are looking at voting. Then we believe that most of the people who basically voted then are feeling that President Vikramasinghe has resurrected the economy, brought some dignity into it, even though his life is difficult. And we believe almost, say, 70-80% of that should come in. So with that particular one, with the UMPs, and you basically have duplicate parties that, try to imitate UMP, virtually being non-existent. Now, when they say that Ranil, they tried to tell a Ranil Rajapaksa combination will now have become Ranil Vikramasinghe. Now what is the rest of him they're doing? They have adopted that. We see it's an insincere move where support seems to be going to the opposition factor. So we believe that the 3 million UMPs we earnestly call upon them to ensure that we rekindle that vote back into the UMP or back into the common candidate approach. Common thinking people that basically comes in, and then the minority votes that are there, all put together. Because we believe it is not a particular race or religion. It is a Sri Lankan identity that we are going after, where the Sinhalese, the Tamils, the Muslims, the Burghers, the Malays, whether it is Buddhists, Catholics, Hindus or Muslims, we basically get a Sri Lankan identity, and President Vikramasinghe wants to represent that Sri Lankan identity.
Now, up until last week, there were polls which seemed to show that the other two candidates, Sajith Premadasa and Anurakumara Dissanayake, were leading in popularity. But with the events that took place this week, where would you position President Ranil Vikramasinghe?
Well, you looked at that in isolation. President Vikramasinghe said he's contesting only last week. So all these surveys were done with the question mark. Many, you yourself asked, is Vikramasinghe coming to contest? Why is he? There are attempts trying to postpone election. Now you could see he was the first to pay the deposit when it so happened to be the elections called. So there was no point telling something and talking in the blind. When the nominations were called and the deposit had to be paid, he was the first to be paying that. So on that score, you have now genuinely the President Vikramasinghe coming forward, and all the excuses that were given trying to postpone elections were acts of the opposition trying to do this to tarnish the image that was here.
Now, I recall the last couple of times that you came on the show, you did tell me and our viewers that there would be no delay, that the presidential election would be held on time, and it looks like that's going to happen.
This is what we believe, telling the truth. I mean, people use it in different ways, but that's the exact stark truth that we told.
So, once the presidential election is held on the 21st of September, and let's look at a scenario. Now, the two opposition candidates have said that they would immediately dissolve Parliament and call a general election. So, we're looking at somewhere around December or January for a general election. If President Vikramasinghe wins, would he do the same, or would he allow the present Parliament to continue through its term?
Nilesh, I would be more affirmative. I mean, with the blessing of the people and God, I'm sure Vikramasinghe will win. When he does this, he has spelled out what the order is. Because why he said was we should not have the incidental elections, to have one main, that is the presidential. Once a presidential, they are reflective of that from Parliament. And that particular one would definitely pursue the presidential election that would come. And from there onwards, it will be a government of the people, for the people, on behalf of the people. So I guess there is no room for experimental purposes. There is no elbows that you can put, where this country has basically suffered too much at the hands of a handful of politicians that have taken it in the wrong manner. Let's get the country back into order.
Would you say that this is the most crucial election of all? Because if wrong decisions are taken by the wrong people in office over the next couple of years, Sri Lanka would find it very difficult to recover, because we've also got 2028 looming, where we have a lot of debt which it would come due. which the president has managed to push back to that time.
Well, Dheeraj, if I may take the other, opportunity 24 months ago was wide open to these contestants that are there from opposition. They had the opportunity to go forward, but they backtracked. They ran away and kept the country completely as to what was going on. But President Vikramasinghe, with his one MPship, he managed to solicit the support of the 224. Out of that got 134 members. And today he has delivered. I mean, grudgingly or otherwise, happily or otherwise, everybody says this man has done something. Whether party belongs to that. That's why he has managed to amass the support of all political parties and back into proper order. So my feeling is that we have got to take the situation as what it is, what it was to what it could be. And there is no time for changes or redirections, etc. It is just one thing. Ensure the right thing is done. Bring financial discipline, bring law and order, bring a sense of feeling that there is good governance, and ensure the country goes into the next lap where we will link up Sri Lanka to the world and bring a sense of decency in and move forward.
Now, you mentioned the minorities as well. Where do you see the different minorities placing themselves in this election? The CWC, of course, has already said that they are supportive of President Vikramasinghe. That's been their line for several months now. Of course, that does represent a lot of the upcountry vote, the estate community. But then you have the minorities in the north, in the east, in Colombo, the Muslim minority in Putlam, and so on. Where do you see them voting, and would their vote be more relevant this time?
Well, we never break it up into minority and majority. We take the Sri Lankan vote as is. And it is the proof of the pudding is in the eating. President Vikramasinghe has always stood for a Sri Lankan identity, and he's ensured that each of those segments are looked at Sri Lankans and delivered the thing. You know, we have sometimes been truthful and lost elections. But today it has proven that what was said then has stood the time of test. So my belief is that all of them would certainly, it has been said time after time, that President Vikramasinghe has been very minority oriented. Today, with the majority all put together, I'm sure he'll get a sizable vote. That will be a record historical win that would be there. Because what I said before is that people believe that this man has done something. When everybody was running away, one man stood on the deck and said, I'll fight the bankruptcy and get the country into good order. I mean, other countries also looking at Sri Lanka and said, hey, we were bankrupt 1 year, 2 years ago, and today you're back in good order. LCs are open, tourists are coming in, the revenues are increased, etc. And I would say that would be the stark reality of people thinking, let's get this man moving forward.
Now, you mentioned President Vikramasinghe being more user-friendly perhaps for minorities, and he has looked into the minorities' issues time and again, but he has not been able to implement the 13th Amendment. What is the situation there? Was it that his hands were tied because of the government that he inherited?
No, Nilesh. I wouldn't say that he was minority friendly. What I said was he was accepted by the minority, and the majority thought that he was minority friendly. But you could see when the opportunity is there, he basically stood by the principles that the country should be one identity, and where everybody can live harmoniously in that situation. So when you have the power and not gone beyond the expectation that was trying to be shaped in onto him, you basically had he showing that that's a true leader that is there. I mean, why you said you can't implement 13th Amendment was, it was only a situation where majority of the entire parliament must approve it. So he was getting the acceptance factor. In the previous government, he led all the political parties and got a acceptance that here it is, that the way forward is what people would like to see implemented. So he got the police, which was the sensitive issue, cleared by all of them. And the land was going to be no problem. So that's why he right along said the 13th Amendment would be implemented with the will of everybody. Now everybody is following that. So why it didn't was that the parliament had to endorse it and time factor was not sufficient.
Right. So now we spoke about the presidential.
And sometimes parties want to talk about it but not solve the problem. You know, they know the problem, they want to dance around it but not solve it.
That has been the bane of Sri Lankan politics.
That has been.
So you mentioned the presidential election and we spoke of the general election. Once all that dust has settled, can we expect the other two elections perhaps sometime next year?
Yeah, my feeling is that the presidential and general done, you have got to look at the local election to be more representative.
Yes.
You know, you can't have a president, 225 members of parliament, 456 provincial councils and 8,900 local councils. You know, this is mad. You've got to get it to a more rational, delivery-oriented and a value for money. You know, you don't need to have hundreds of guys doing nothing. You might as well have a representation which is sane and more acceptable, and that delivering what is expected of them. So I guess once the main two are done, then people should refocus as to how it should be. But now, see, local councils are functioning now without all the local councillors, but things are happening. So then there needs to be a corrective action whether numbers only play a problem to the thing or is it in nation developing.
But on the other hand, a representative democracy does require local government, the people to be more involved in local government.
The question was, up to 2018, there was roughly about 3,000, which became 9,000.
Yes.
But was there a qualitative difference? No, I think there was an erosion of quality. Now, numbers doesn't necessarily mean quality goes up. It sometimes affects the quality of delivery. So that's where I said number, the representation is absolutely essential, no question about it. But it has to be meaningful and value for money.
Interesting thought, and I can't say that I disagree with you on that. It is rather amazing to have 8,000 odd local councillors, but you do need to have the councils being representative, and I'm glad you agree on that. Now, how do you think the other two major candidates, Anurukumara Dissanayake and Sajith Premadasa, would be viewing this week's events swirling around the SLPP? What's your opinion on how they'd be looking at it?
I would sincerely call upon, they were thinking of trying to sell a platform, which now the platform has completely been hijacked in different ways. Earlier they were talking, here they are all together, one corrupt lot. Now when that entire lot is not there, what are they going to say? So back to basics, which means this is what Vikramasinghe was standing for. He basically said this is the way forward, and he stood his ground and did, while being gratitude for election process, he also stood that there has to be some discipline in moving forward. That's why you have, out of all the people that work together, almost 100 and 104 people getting together, supporting. And you'll see a lot of others also taking place. Earlier they said, we can't come because of this. Now when they don't come, then that coming is completely of different purpose, because what they said and they stood for is now non-existent. So now the people that went to duplicate parties can come back to the main parties and work in the heterogeneous alliance, which working towards a non-political presidential candidate.
Interesting thoughts indeed. We are in conversation with former Minister Ravi Karunanayake, and we will cross over to a short commercial break. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Experience the ultimate robot battle at Electro Combat 2024. Join us on August 3rd, 8 a.m. at the Faculty of Technology, University of Sri Jayawardhanapura. Free entrance for everyone. Thrilling robot combat awaits. Media sponsor, TV1.
TV1. TV for life.
Now, especially during this heated election period, and as always, the Newsfirst team is working tirelessly to bring you the very latest and the most accurate information through our trilingual bulletins. Now, today with us we have Charlene Benedict to enlighten us on what to expect on our primetime news bulletin at 9 p.m.
Well, it's been quite a number of contentious days with issues being taken up in the Supreme Court, the presidential election coming along. People are still, although the presidential election has been declared, there are still certain things that needs to be ironed out. Yesterday, the Elections Commission had sent a notice, of course, or a letter to the president asking him to resolve this issue surrounding the IGP's position. Now, there are some significant developments in that front as well. The Police Commission has appointed Senior Deputy Inspector General of Police Lalit Patinaika as the Senior Deputy Inspector General of Police in charge of police administration.
Yesterday and today has been a very eventful day for the whole country, and as you mentioned, Minister Ali Sabri mentioned about the Indian fisherman death, which is one of the major top stories that we are taking today, and also he mentioned about the agreements that they have come out with the IMF, and also he mentioned about the Japanese projects that were suspended a few years ago, the 13 projects that he said that the government of Sri Lanka and the Japanese government will be starting on those 13 projects, and he also mentioned about how successful were his trips to other countries, to Romania, to Japan, and to many more countries within the last few months.
Thank you, Budman. Well, that's all from the newsroom for now. For more comprehensive reports on these stories and much more, make sure to tune in to our Prime Time News Bulletin at 9 p.m. on TV1.
TV1. TV for life.
Welcome back. You're watching Face to Face. We are in conversation with Mr. Ravi Karunanayake, former cabinet minister. Now, Ravi, let us assume that President Vikramasinghe wins the next election and that the UNP goes on to win the general election which would follow. And this is, of course, all speculation, but I'd like to ask you, in such a situation, where would you be? Because after all, it is of interest to our viewers and to all members of the public as to what such a government would look like. So you have been in the past, you've been finance minister, foreign minister, and you've had several other ministries. Now you were named Asia's best finance minister during your term in that post, and the finance ministry is probably the most crucial ministry, no matter who wins the presidency and the general election. Would you be back in the finance ministry?
Naresh, if I may say, our main task is ensuring that President Vikramasinghe wins. Winning that would basically bring stability into the country. All others are incidental. In that particular process, I think this country deserves to have a very professional, can-do mentality-oriented government into the future. So I think the first step is the leader of that pack, and that would be the president. He has displaced, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Country went through some very drastic changes. Nobody dared to come out of that. Many people ran away saying they can't perform in this type of environment. So I guess the first test needs to be getting that done. With that, I'm sure the people also have realized that just electing people is not the requirement. You're going to elect competent, qualitative people into the system. And let that be, instead of being presumptuous, let us take the will of the people into that focus and ensure that we come with the best possible governing parliament and officials that are there, cabinet and all, that can get this country out of this disaster. We are 76 years in independence, but we have still not got true economic independence. So I guess we need to have a policy corporate plan, perspective planning. We need to have perdurable policies that stand the test of time. Not every government change, you change policies. So we have got to get that into place and ensure that Sri Lanka is put into the world map. Because today, it's not borders that matter. It is one world order. And ensure that we play a pivotal role in that. We have India next door, which is probably next 3-4 years will be a $10 trillion market. Let us get 2-3% of that. Our per capita will go up to about $10,000 to $12,000. So that is where we have opportunities before us. But instead of holding boards and placards and shouting around every day, getting tear gassed and water this thing, ensure that we have development of the nation. These are things that happen. Remember, Niresh, in 2020, I can very well remember President Vikramasinghe then as the leader, he said, this country requires $7 billion to come out of it. I just brought this particular one because that was the manifesto that we basically spelled. Nobody dared tell anything at that particular moment, but in page number 11, which shows that we have said there is a drop in revenue, reserves are come down drastically. If you want to resurrect, you need to have the blessings of the IMF for being qualitative oriented. But at that particular moment, there is no bankruptcy, but they were basically heading towards that. We basically said, let's have at least $6 billion to be brought in as additional reserves or work towards that. This is what we have basically showed. Now, at that particular moment, they thought we were fanciful, we were idiotic, we were out of real practical rate. But today, it has been proven right. When the IMF came in to discuss the 2022 bankruptcy, getting out of it, they said, why don't you rely on what you did in 2015, 2016? If you did that, you don't need the IMF. So we are coming back to reinventing the wheel. That is where we have got to get this competence factor. So I'm sure the people have seen this type of problem and would realign themselves or be realistic in order to put the country first instead of getting carried away with slogans and wishful thinking. This country has gone through many, we have changed governments to 72 cents of sugar per kilo. We are trying to get, 2 kilos of rice coming from the moon. You had bread which was sold at 5, which was said will reduce to 350, and you had changes in government. So this type of absolutely nonsensical political aspects have led to bankrupt this country. So let's reawaken ourselves, be more in line with our peers in this region, and do what is good, where we stand on our own feet and ensure that we have financial discipline moving forward.
Now, you showed us one of the past manifestos. What about the new one, the President's new manifesto?
Well, that will come in due time. As soon as the nominations are over, it will be brought in, and then you can run through and see, here is the way forward for the country. We have already said we have a 5-year thing. In that 5 years, every per year rollout for the 5 years, and then walk towards the next thing of 100-year country getting independence. That's why they say 2048, not to just say our problem will be solved in 2048, to move towards a very fast developed nation by 2048. But we live by the day, not by the next 2 decades that are going to come. Ensure that we show the way forward. You have your perspective planning broken down to strategy, into tactics, and a year-on role for yearly performance, and then you have 5-year performance, and then go on to the perspective planning for the 2048.
Well, we'll certainly be waiting for President Vikramasinghe's new manifesto, and as you said, right after the nominations close, it will come out, and certainly we will invite you back to discuss that as well, hopefully. Despite your busy schedule, you are, after all, the National Secretary of the UNP, and you'll be very busy campaigning. I'm sure you are already. Now, you mentioned the current economic situation, and Ravi, the people are hard-pressed. President Vikramasinghe inherited a disaster, and the austerity measures did cause and continue to cause a lot of challenges for people on a day-to-day basis. The number of people below the poverty level, and so on and so forth. A lot of people leaving the country, the brain drain. So all this is a massive issue, a massive set of issues. So how would you go about with a new government, perhaps alleviating the situation where the public is concerned?
Well, Nilesh, you could see that President Vikramasinghe has walked the talk. He has not been election-oriented and said, no, I don't want to have financial discipline. He has said, no, country first. Let me be not the most populist president, but let me be the most effective president. And through that process, you have managed to go through the big problem, because the people are going through some tough times. And this turbulence has to be navigated very carefully. But in that process, you cannot be basically living beyond your means. You have got to live with the revenues that are there. You have, out of your total taxes were paid by the general people, from anybody and to everybody, you basically collect X amount, and up to 23 years, you are paying 84% of that to government servants for their pensions and salaries. So you are left with 16% on government revenue to pay off or to spend for health, education, nation development, that is capital expenditure, for investment oriented, and pay your loans as well. So on that basis, can you survive with 16% to do all of this? So obviously you have a very hefty lethargic bureaucracy. Now our country has, for every 7 people, you have 1 government bureaucrat. In India, in Japan, you roughly have 400 to 500 per person. So there is a ballooning impact, that you have too much, that is, they are doing too little, or it's not efficacious. Efficacy is lacking. So on that basis, you have got to ensure that all these are rectified and go forward.
So
there is no point saying you want to develop it and have the same old malaise going on. That needs to be rectified. You have to have fiscal consolidation, because to increase your fiscal space, and with that process ensure borrowing is not the problem, but borrowing where revenue is greater than your cost is the problem. We have been living in the past where you have borrowing at 6-7%, earning a revenue 0.5%, 1% revenue. That is where it led to all this.
So looking at the government sector, now you mentioned that 84% of government revenue is going towards paying state sector salaries and pensions. I'm
referring to year 22, 23, because now revenues have increased, so it is the case. But that was a good example to show the disparity that is there between revenue collection and the cost that goes into just sustain 1.7 million government servants. You have 8.5 million private sector workforce, which don't enjoy that particular thing. They are only contributing as taxes to ensure you maintain that 1.7 million government servants.
So can we see that 1.7 million reduced, and how would you set about it? Because you can't sort of stop paying.
No, I would say make it more efficient oriented. You can get them to do much more work. Today, probably look at your station, you'll probably have 300-400 people. Look at the government TV station, has about 1,500. Now your output is very professional compared to them. With such a lot of people, the output that is there, you will see what the difference I'm trying to say. So I am being brutally frank instead of being, you asked a question. There's no point me having two different approaches. It needs to give an answer which is sustainable and also it solves the problem. That is why I said when we said $6,000 at that time, I'm sorry, $6 billion, people laughed at it by saying these are only gimmicks and numbers. But we have opposition that is in parliament today who couldn't read that they were going to bankruptcy in 2022. So that's the sense of, professionalism or lack of maturity. People that even not even run a beetle leaf company are trying to run nations.
Now, you mentioned the New World Order and India in particular, and the Indian economic growth and how we should connect with it. Could you elaborate a bit more about this? Because right now the projections for our own economic growth are simply on the low side, but considering that the country has been in a state of bankruptcy, perhaps it's good to have any plus side to it at all. But still, when you look 3, 4, 5 years down the road, we do need to ramp it up.
Sure. I mean, your projections are 2.2% growth for the next 1-2 years. We require at least 7 to 8%. And that would mean that you need to have robust investment. Investments need policy decisions. You can't have policies that are brought in today, change tomorrow. You have to have a government mechanism that approves things today, not tomorrow. You have to have that sense of efficiency. Look at India. India is on the move. 20 years ago, India was looking to us to say, let's showcase Sri Lanka and do our business. Today, we are looking at them by the speed they have gone because they have digitized the economy. And today, if Prime Minister Modi wants to give a certain policy-oriented message, say, I want to, bring, the youth entrepreneurship, he can basically use the digitized card and get the message out in 2 days. We would have circular upon circular, and decision taken would take at least 6 months to be thought of. That's the difference. So you have to have that cutting edge. You can't hold placards and shout and try to get that type of operation. Today it's a modern world. That's why I say you need that sense of consistency and change.
Now, as a person who made his name in the private sector, let me ask you, which industries suit Sri Lanka and Sri Lankans best? Because we can't expect Sri Lankans to suddenly turn a new leaf and start focusing on industries where we don't have much experience. So which industries are best for us? Is it tourism? Is it agro exports?
Well, my feeling is that the GDP is constituted of about 65 to 70% on the service industry. In the service industry, you have the banking sector, the insurance sector, the logistics sector, shipping, aviation, all of them play a pivotal role. That is the way forward. You need to modernize it. You need to take the antiquated laws away. It needs to be world-friendly policies being adopted and ensure that is the first step. Next is you have got to bring high-tech agriculture into the system. We have a subsistence-oriented agriculture. That's why it still brings 13-14% of GDP. We are supposed to be one of the best irrigable lands that are there in the world, but we are still importing almost 185 to 200 billion rupees of imports into the country, whether onions, chilies, potatoes, etc. We are unable to fulfill our requirement. So these need to be going into agriculture high-tech operations, so that you have today green farms that are there, you can have drip irrigation that is there, and able to increase your yield that comes out of the land that is utilized in the present day. Then you go into industries. today industries needs that modern technology development that is there. My feeling is that the policy oriented thing, today you have to take decisions that are swift and clear. Now, business is not easy today. My feeling is the central bank has to be much more business oriented. Their job should not be attacking anti-inflationary approach. It should be more supply side development approach. That would basically mean expand your economy. Contraction of the economy to trying to reduce inflation is not the job of the central bank. There should be, government job is increasing the economic activities. If the central bank does something quite to the contrary, who runs? People elect the government. Government needs to have basically way forward. You can't have roadblocks that come in between the people that people elect and between officials that run it just because there's a sense of independence that is there. So my feeling is that quantum leap needs to take place, and that should be done yesterday, not tomorrow. That's going to be the difference.
Well, I certainly agree with you that we are far too backward in many industries. Quantum leap needs to be made in all of them. Why didn't it happen so far? You mentioned the central bank policies, but let's take agro exports, for example. What's wrong with the policymakers in agriculture? Why is it that being primarily an agricultural nation for thousands of years, why didn't we seize on these new technologies and move forward?
Economies of scale advantage. You are basically having rice grown here. Now, last time, about 6-7 years ago, I made the reflection, and it was so polarized in the media and the opposition. They are trying to say, here we are trying to stop national production and import. This type of stupidity that exists even now has paid the price of our country going to bankruptcy. You have got to ensure that cost of production is basically minimized. When you have 18-20% interest rates and you have permit after permit, circular after circular, brings you additional 5-10 rupees per kilo cost, how are you going to compete with the region? So this type of nonsense needs to be rectified. And I guess my feeling is, and I earnestly say that, we must do away with all the circulars and have just one circular that covers a subject matter. Because today, when you have salary differences, you go into 1970 circulars, even in 2024. So that type of nonsense has to be corrected. If you are going to amend a circular that modernizes your circular today for tomorrow, not live in the dead past. That is where you have got to take decisions. But today life is becoming very difficult for ministers. You do one, they go into court. You have another, they'll say different treatment. They live to basically make life difficult. So my feeling is that you have got to be task oriented, have decision making, combined decision making that is there. Each minister may not be professional in his own field, but you have a team that takes decisions and run forward. Today, officials wait for a politician to give a thing, and many politicians wait for the official to give their report, which never comes. So you have got to take this change, and that change needs to be nation development.
Now, what about the micro, small and medium sectors? They've been devastated over the last couple of years. High interest rates, high electricity and fuel. It's been very difficult for a small businessman to survive. But they constitute more than 50% of our economy.
63%. My knowledge is 63.
That's quite amazing. So how would you go about resurrecting
my approach there is, now look at 2022, April or May, when the country was going in the normal way, paying 10-11% interest of small and medium. Suddenly, central bank goes saying that they have a soft landing and they go bankrupt. They come back 1 week later and the 8 to 10% interest is increased to 30%. Now that 30% will basically have to be paid by the small and medium. They never planned for this. How can that innocent person who has no connectivity between decision making and to pay his price for the future, how many people went belly up with that particular one? we run businesses, it is almost virtually impossible to plan yourself. Just come and say a country is bankrupt. If the central bank can't basically guide the country from being bankrupt and manage their debt payment, how can you expect a small and medium guy to be told, you basically have to survive your own? This is a case of, you do what I say but don't do what I do. That's going to be the case. So that small and medium have suffered for the last 2 years. And there is, except for the situation of postponing their financial payments for, moratorium being increased, they have to pay through that period. They were not given, interest free. They were given a moratorium. Now there has to be much more risk-oriented approaches in the bank. Banks can't just lend for nothing, but they also have got to realize in changing turbulent times. Banks in this country would basically lend when the sun is shining and take the umbrella back when it's raining. You have got to be risk-oriented. I guess we have got to ensure that the balance sheets of the banks are far too small. There must be consolidation. And ensure that you lend with certain priority sectors. We are basically lending for import because that seems to be the easiest to get your money and finish it off. But you have to have venture capital things that are coming, small and medium to be given. And I think President Vikramasinghe has looked at that and ensured that he's given a lot of areas assistance in small and medium. But that comes at a price that they are paid. As I said, when they are making such policies, there must be affordability and the can pay concept has to be there. Affordability and the payment ability.
Now, Ravi, you mentioned the banking sector, but the fact is that Sri Lanka today doesn't have any development banks per se. Like what we had in the early 90s, we had NDB and DFCC, which their primary purpose was to get the economy going, expanding by lending in the form of development aid.
So that is why I told Nilesh, you have got to be supply side development aid. Those two banks are viable commercial banks today. Not that they have lost their focus. It is just that they have gone into commercial lending, which is better than long-term lending. Why long-term lending? Because they are also scared because the government makes decisions for today and not for tomorrow. So you need to have consistent, coherent, long-term planning that is there. You need to have a clear distance between short-term business and long-term business. If you give that care, you give that safety net for investments to go for 15, 20 years, you must have policies also that go with the same. Not to be changing, every day or every week. That's going to be the difference.
Now, another area of concern is foreign direct investment. Right now, we don't get a lot of FDI. And we are, after all, competing with the Vietnams and Indias and Malaysias and so on. How would you set about rectifying that situation?
Well, I think you have modernized. Now just reading, I'll just have a look. Port City Economic Commission has just put out their new act, which is amended and being more in line with the world. Dinesh Virakori, knowledgeable. President has instructed that, bring it in line today with the world order and ensure that we have that sense of belonging that, why do people go to Singapore, Dubai? Why do they go into areas like Vietnam? There's a sense of consistency. They won't change policies just at the whims and the fancies of some people. They go through that policy-oriented decision making rather than spur of the moment or knee-jerk reacted policies. So that's going to be the difference.
And
today, we like it or not, POI is not playing the role it should be. We should face reality. They may have their own thing, but let it be corrected where you are able to have one day approval. Not everything is one day, but able to have that sense of efficiency. If you look at a bank, today to get $1 million rupees, you basically have to pay about a 3 million, 4 million collateral. And even that, you have to sign about 30, 40 pages of signatures to go into one place. This has to be changed.
Interesting thoughts indeed. We are almost out of time. Ravi, any final thoughts on the political situation we might see in the next few days?
Well, all I want to emphasize is that we need sense of consistency, coherency, and can-do mentality. There is no time for experimental purposes. There is no point of a wishful journey. It needs to have what couldn't have been achieved at that particular moment has now been achieved. So who couldn't take a challenge that moment is out of the race any case. So then who could do is the one that needs to get an endorsement. With that particular one, let's think country first and move forward. When that is over, we have got to ensure that we have the critical mass that is created in the country with market access that is there, and ensure that we leverage our geographical location in order to ensure that Sri Lanka deserves to get what it's really got to get. You know, we have got to be, our foreign policy should be friends of all, enemies with none. Let's leverage India, which is close by. Look at the market access we have to USA, the European Union. Look at the competitiveness that comes in for Chinese investments that is coming in. Look at the region that is there. Position ourselves and exploit the opportunity. That's where we got. Look at the youth in the country today are yearning for recognition. They want only opportunity. They don't want to run after every politician and say, give me a job. This concept of, government jobs to be given, nonsense must stop. You must ensure that transfers of household transfers, like the Aswasum and all, target to the real. Today, many get that don't deserve to get, and those who should get doesn't get. So those needs to be corrected. Then you look at the women and the ladies of this country. They need a sense of recognition, sense of decency in that approach, and the elderly to make life today better than what it was yesterday. That's the way forward to do this. So this entire change would ensure that you have a completely new order that comes in. And up to now, the election platforms were Ranil is going to protect one family, one country, one party, one aspect. Now that is blown. Now it has come to that he has got the opportunity of representing the country and protecting everybody rather than single people. So I guess we are there. I earnestly call upon to ensure that there is confidence instead of, backstabbing and ensure wrong information coming in. Let the truth come out and ensure that we go forward.
Ravi Karunanayake, National Secretary of the UNP, thank you very much for spending the time with us, and thank you to all our viewers at home for watching. The news is coming up next, so don't go away. Have a very good evening.